Hello, back on TikTok. I'm going to do a very quick 5-minute video analysing The Farmer's Bride. So it was written by Charlotte Mew. Charlotte Mew was very anti-men. She didn't really like the idea of how much control they had over society, and she really detested the patriarchy. I think this hatred is very clear in The Farmer's Bride. Remember, this poem is not autobiographical, it is completely fictional, but the underlying message and meaning demonstrates the poet's frustration with the patriarchy at the time it was written. So overall, it deals with themes of misogyny, so essentially the patriarchy, men ruling the world, women being inferior. It deals with power, it deals with objectification, and it really focuses on gender as well. It's structured in a way that the kind of message and overall relationship between the farmer and the wife, aka the bride, it gets worse and worse all the way until the end. And in that final stanza, there's more punctuation included throughout, and it kind of demonstrates this desperate need of the farmer to try and gain control of his relationship, but it reflects the frustration that he never really achieves that control. It's structured using iambic tetrameter with a varied rhyme scheme, and it's also meant to symbolize, it's also meant to mimic the farmer's voice. It's always said from his perspective. The bride never gets a say, she never has a voice, a little bit like Love's Philosophy, a little bit like When We Two Parted, a little bit like a lot of our poems actually, Euphoria's Lover. It's about a woman, but she never gets to speak, she never has a voice. But it's important to acknowledge that it's supposed to mimic this farmer's voice, and he's meant to sound uneducated in the poem. We've also got a lot of enjambment when we're looking at structure, and that reflects the continuation of this marriage just never being anything, never working out, the farmer never getting the control that he wants. Now let's think about the language specifically. The Farmer's Bride is a great way to start. The fact that it starts with the farmer's bride, it shows that possession there of the poor wife. And the fact that we've got the word bride demonstrates that she never really left that bride title. She never became a wife. She never did what the farmer wanted her to do. And it reflects how she was trapped in this relationship. And that's reiterated by that first line of 3 summers since I chose a maid. Sorry, Fergie wants to help with this one. Here she is. 3 summers since I chose a maid. And that idea of chose and I reiterates that it is the farmer making the decisions, the farmer having all the control. The verb chose suggests that the wife again had no say in the matter. She didn't get to pick who she was going to marry, and reiterates the idea of possession. Then the idea of 3 summers since, it opens up the poem to suggest that this relationship has been bad for a very long time. He's kind of got frustrated with it. And equally, the use of summers, it links to the ideas, the symbolism of the seasons and how it's ongoing, never changes. Again, reiterating the relationship, never changing, never fixing, just getting worse and worse and worse. And I think that's evident as the bride or the wife starts to run away. Then you've got the fricative alliteration of frightened Faye. It's quite a good key line to consider. The alliteration is almost, it sounds quite violent, that objectification of her. It makes her seem vulnerable and small, a Fae being something linked to the idea of her being a fairy, so mythical, quite like if you think of a fairy, they're quite small little creatures. She's mythical, vulnerable, small. All of the similes he uses to describe her make her vulnerable and small. So, for example, we've got like a mouse as well. That simile demonstrates her as something very, very weak, very small, needing to be protected. But instead, he just controls her or attempts to control her all the time. And then she runs away. He gets her back, controls her. And then the final 2 lines I want you to consider would be shy as a leveret. Again, another simile to reiterate her vulnerability and her weakness. A leveret being a hare, so very jumpy, very frightened. And I think the fact that she's shy reinforces her personality being completely trapped, completely isolated. He's her husband, and yet he doesn't know who she is. He doesn't know anything about her. And finally, we caught her. links to this idea of control and her being trapped. She never got to get away. So it is a really good poem to talk about things like the patriarchy, control, misogyny. It's great to talk about one with structure because of that use of enjambment, and we've got loads of similes in there to reiterate the poet's meaning. Plus, you want to think about Charlotte Mew as the writer and her intentions behind not giving the bride a voice. Hope this helps.